Welcome to this very special episode of ArtHouse 2, the FartHouse. As I believe all of you should know by now, we are in the midst of the biggest fundraising effort ever in Scarecrow history. And so this episode is all about us turning to movies for lessons in how to raise money or save the thing you love. And I've asked Jamie to kick it off for us.
And I said no. Wait, I said yes. So my first choice is a movie that is fun to contextualize. Imagine a time where many people aren't working, there are gas lines, and you will find yourself in the late 70s. And the movie I picked was Americathon from 1979, directed by Neil Israel. And him and the producers basically went on to write a bunch of 80s classics like Real Genius, Police Academy, and Bachelor Party. And I don't know if this is their first movie, but it's the first movie of theirs that I saw. And it's a movie set in the future, the 1979 future, of I think 1998, where people don't drive anymore, they live in their cars. That's pretty true to nowadays. Politics have basically just fallen apart, and America's broke and they need to raise some money, so they have a telethon. And the telethon initially starts off with, because of some plot machinations, with literally hours of ventriloquists, and then it devolves into just basically another form of the reality TV that we know and love today, that's basically guiding us to the apocalypse. John Ritter is the president. He has never been more made up. He is gloriously rouged up in this movie for whatever reason. Sweatsuits up and down this film, non-stop sweatsuits. It's got a pretty good soundtrack. The Beach Boys do a really good theme song, the Mike Love Beach Boys, and Elvis Costello's in it. There's tons of cameos. Meatloaf has a great part in it. Harvey Korman's great. Jay Leno boxes his mom, and it's basically famous nowadays for not being that great of a movie, but it talks about a lot of things that were kind of close to happening. If you think about the way the world was going to go in the late 70s to the late 90s, it's not true, but if you think about now, it's a little more accurate. And so it's a funny movie. It's going to be funnier if you contextualize and you know kind of what was going on in the late 70s that made this satire kind of interesting. But my takeaway from it, the thing that I learned from it, was if you're having trouble raising money and the talking dummies don't work, blow shit up and hope somebody gets hurt.
Which I think actually we've used in our own fundraising.
Spoiler alert, I'm going to blow up at the end of this tape.
My first pick is Pride from 2014, directed by Matthew Warchus. This is set in 1980s Great Britain. So that's the Thatcher era, and also think about the miners' strike. This is a story about a London-based gay and lesbian group that is really touched by a story of a small Welsh mining town that is really struggling to survive. And so they decide to take it upon themselves to raise money in order to help them out. The town itself in Wales is very reluctant to accept the money because of the source of where it's coming from. And the movie is really about each of these two different groups looking at their biases and trying to find some mutual acceptance. My lesson in this is that support can come from really unexpected places, and that you always have to have an open heart and an open mind.
My next choice is BREAKIN 2 Electric Boogaloo. And it's a movie where the community center is closing down, and the kids have to get together and put on a show, basically, to save the community center. And this movie came out 7 months after the original, the very successful BREAKIN. Basically, Canon hired one of their go-tos who does nothing but American Ninja and cyborg cop movies to direct a musical. Doesn't make sense to me either. It's fun to hang out with the characters from BREAKIN, Shabba-Doo, Special K, and Boogaloo Shrimp, but they don't seem like the same characters. They exist in some type of different universe that reminds me more of Fame than BREAKIN. But it's still an entertaining movie. It's still fun to watch. It's just not as good as the first movie, and it just seems like like they didn't understand what was great about the first movie and tried to make their own movie, which isn't as great. So my takeaway from that, if you're in a sequel and the community center is closing and you need to help it stay open, put on a Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland style musical instead, so white people will donate.
Okay. Well, my second choice is actually a little bit unusual for me because I don't know that this would technically be in the art house. It is a movie from 1979 called The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, directed by Gilbert Moses. And it is a story about a failing pro basketball team in Pittsburgh that, as a last resort, turns to an astrologer to help guide their decisions and save the team. It features basketball legend Julius Erving, as well as amazing choreography by Debbie Allen. And Stockard Channing plays Mona Mondu, who is the astrologer. And there's also just a smattering of 70s familiar faces. My lesson that I learned from this is that sometimes you have to think outside of the box or turn to the stars in order to save something that you love.
Or outside of the paint, to use a basketball terminology. My next choice is, it will fall under the Saving What You Love, and it's from 1990 director John Landis's magnum opus. It's The Blues Brothers. And The Blues Brothers seems like a movie that is made for three people, and those three people are Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, and John Landis. It doesn't make any sense because they say, let's do a musical that has amazing acts and deadpan humor, nonstop car crashes, and Illinois Nazis. I'm pretty sure there wasn't a production meeting that they said, let's hit the 4 quadrants of entertainment value. But because it's so amazingly weird and unto itself, it's just one of a kind, you know, like there's no other movie like it. The musical numbers are amazing. Truly amazing, and that's because of the artists that perform in it and also because of John Landis's direction. John Landis's direction in those scenes is just super filled with joy, and I will never get tired of watching that movie. My takeaway from that is there is no amount of party-fueled drugs that can substitute for people like Ray Charles, James Brown, and Aretha Franklin to raise money.
All right, my third choice is Calendar Girls from 2003, directed by Nigel Coles. So this is the story of a group of women that are part of the Women's Institute in a small village in Yorkshire, so in Great Britain. And they come up with this daring idea to raise money, which is to have a nude calendar.
Did you say a new calendar?
A nude calendar. And so what happens as part of their endeavors just goes way beyond what any of them could have ever imagined. So my takeaway from this movie is taking your clothes off raises money. And I'm thinking maybe a Scarecrow calendar is in our future. So a few strategically placed. No.
Not again. No. My next choice, because Kate went outside the parameters of our deal, I decided to do the same thing because I'm like that. My choice that doesn't exactly come from the FartHouse, it's literally a classic, undisputed classic, is Dog Day Afternoon from 1975, directed by Sidney Lumet and starring some of the finest actors of the 70s or any time. Married Al Pacino decides to rob a bank to get money to fund his lover's sex change operation, and the movie never does anything but takes that seriously. It's incredibly respectful to the true story that the movie's based upon. And it's one of my favorite New York City movies because Lumet just films the city amazingly. He films around for the beginning of it, but then he settles his camera on the characters and on the people outside, and it just feels like one of the prototypical 70s New York movies. Very well done. The script and Lumet's direction basically humanize every single character because the script's amazing, and also Lumet allows the actors, the amazing actors who had all worked together a long time before on the stage and screen, to improvise certain things that make the movie seem intensely realistic. And it's a perfect combination. It's heartbreaking at the same time as hopeful, and that's rare. So my takeaway for that is if you have a personal interest and you truly believe what you're raising money for, no amount of laws will stop you.
All right, my fourth pick is Cold Turkey from 1971, which is directed and also co-written by Norman Lear. This is a wacky story about this small, down on its luck Iowa town who decides to pull together and stop smoking for 30 days in order to win $25,000. Dick Van Dyke plays a minister who goes so far as to take up smoking in order to stop smoking so he can suffer the same hardships as everybody else, and is the person who really rallies everybody together, holds them true to this mission to not smoke for 30 days. My lesson that I took away from this is that sometimes the challenges that we face seem really impossible, but with enough grit and tenacity, and importantly, a sense of community, they can be overcome.
My final choice, my fifth choice, is a movie by the great Graydon Clark. And it is 1983's Joysticks. And if you know the work of Graydon Clark, you know what you're in for. You know, like, he makes B movies, Final Justice, Without Warning. He makes them well for B movies, but they are inherently B movies. This movie treats women pretty piss poorly. They objectifies them. The women are around to just take their tops off, but if you can contextualize it, it's good to go back and see what movies used to represent and then know that we're far enough away from it where it seems weird, but you can still enjoy it for what it is. It's like a time machine, basically. This is a story, hence the name Joysticks. It's about saving the arcade. Joe Don Baker plays a giant asshole. I don't know if they just filmed it documentary style, and like he was just being a jerk that day on set. It probably took 2 days to film. The movie is filled with 80s protagonists, and 80s protagonists are always like the biggest assholes for some reason. This movie is just packed with pieces of human garbage, and it's always the guys. They just are, they are focused on the worst aspects of being a man in the 80s. Their entire journey through life is getting laid and keeping the arcade open, which is important. So my takeaway of this movie is you don't have to be a total asshole to save the arcade, but if it's the 80s, it doesn't hurt.
And that's gonna help us.
It's not.
Oh,
it's
okay.
not.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay, my final pick is It's a Wonderful Life from 1947. This is Frank Capra's probably jewel in his crown, even though there are a lot to pick from. This is one of the all-time great classics from the studio era. George Bailey, the main character, has sacrificed all of his hopes and dreams and given his whole life to helping and saving the town and community that he loves. But through a series of mishaps, he's on the verge of losing everything, including his will to live, when fate, or angels, intervene. And my lesson, and this is probably the most important of all of the lessons from today, is that, and I'm going to actually paraphrase it from the last scene in the movie itself, no person is a failure who has friends. Scarecrow has been so fortunate to have so many generous, loving, and supportive friends. And because of that, we cannot fail in this. We ask you to please join in and be a part of the future of physical media.